Hello my good friends, welcome to the channel Digimon Explained. My name is Jesse and in this video we're going to make a top 10 list of Digimon swordsmen. And my god, there are many swordsmen in the Digimon universe, which means that this list is highly likely going to be quite controversial. Look, you will not agree with this list. Let's just say it how it is. I repeat, you will not agree with this list. And you know what? Am I expecting you guys to agree? No, not really. In fact, I want you to disagree, as long as you explain your choices down below. Just make sure your answers are as elaborate as possible, and let us have a good debate about it. And boy, a debate it will be, because I doubt we can all agree on one top 10 Digimon swordsman list. Now, before jumping into it, I do have a question. What makes a good swordsman? When we are talking about, let us say, a samurai or a gladiator, I have no doubt we can find evaluation criteria in which all of them would fit. But the Digimon universe is a totally different and, quite frankly, an insane world where swords work quite differently. Not only does the Digimon itself have skills to enhance the use of its sword, but the sword itself can have some wild abilities too. So I have made a list with some basic criteria for evaluation in which I hope most would fit. You guys might somewhat agree and maybe disagree, oh well. Quite frankly, you will see later on in this video that Digimon took swordsmanship really to a complete different level. So, for me, a good Digimon swordsman needs to at least be strong in some, if not all, of the following 3 criteria to make it into my top 10 list. First, it must be able to fight multiple opponents at once. Now, you shouldn't take this one lightly. There are many Digimon swordsmen out there who have techniques that will pretty much kill an opponent immediately, but if it were to only rely on its sword, it would end up getting ran over quickly if surrounded by multiple opponents. So the Digimon swordsman needs to be capable of fighting multiple opponents at once with just its sword. Second criteria, the sword itself must have at least one extra ability to give the Digimon swordsman an edge in battle. This one is just as important as the first one, and with extra abilities I mean that it can summon the elements, use a sword that is unblockable, etc. Third and final criteria, the Digimon swordsman itself must have extra abilities to give itself or its sword an advantage. In other words, if the swordsman can use magical abilities to enhance its sword game, then by any means use it. If it carries armor, then it is also just fine. If it has other ways of healing itself, enhancing its speed, etc., that is all good, as long as it only relies on its sword when it attacks. Using something like a gun is strictly forbidden. Now, if I judge based on the criteria I displayed, I would give Lobomon the 10th spot. See, Lobomon is using 2 light swords called Light Schwert. With that, it can use various techniques. To be honest, it is an excellent swordsman and truly excels in close range. When it connects its 2 swords, it can also release a burst of light energy with an intensity that can vary depending on its wish. Now, Lobomon is very unique as a swordsman. You see, the lavender parts all over its body are known as Saint Amethyst. It's actually a purple gem which gives the lasers power. Due to its holy light, the amethyst retains extraordinary hardness and will give the lightsaber more energy. More energy means more ways to do damage. But there's a hidden condition. Lobomon must keep a righteous spirit. The second a negative spirit arises in the possessor, the amethyst will become brittle, or in other words, it will become liable to break. And this could pretty much signify Lobomon's downfall. But all in all, Lobomon is skilled enough to do well in a duel, and I have no doubt it can face multiple opponents. However, that amount of opponents will be severely limited. And sure, the swords can summon energy blasts to hit opponents who are a bit more distanced, but will that suffice? How many of them would perish before they close in? Speaking of swords, as the Light Schwert are energy swords, can they really cut through anything? What if an opponent is well armored in, let us say, Chrome Digizoid, the strongest metal? So again, Lobomon is very capable and well versed in the art of duels, but I would call it the most honest swordman out of the bunch, maybe a bit too honest, with nothing that is really out of the ordinary. And its performance is quite bound to various conditions, so I think that the 10th spot is well deserved. And to be honest, I was even hesitating to put Pitemon in Lobomon's place because Lobomon's performance relies heavily on having a positive spirit. And Pitemon, being not only a clown but also a wizard, who are known for their high intelligence, sure has all the tools to alter its mood and quite frankly also to defeat it. Paimon uses a unique combination of 4 swords and magic to make them teleport wherever it so desires to skewer the opponent. All it would take is to find the blind spots and the game might be pretty much over. I believe that the combination of magic and 4 swords is certainly a skill that cannot be underestimated. Anyway, I gave the 9th spot to Edgemont, the Authority Angel Digimon and commander of the Angelic Army. I might get some backlash here because it isn't really carrying a sword. However, as its entire appearance pretty much is synonymous with blades, I kind of had to put it in the list. Its entire body has gained a razor sharp appearance and its wings, hands and even its foot became blades. Its body is also covered in a metallic armor which will probably enable it to tank certain attacks. As Edgemont was created in order to battle wicked beings, there is no doubt in my eyes that it belongs among the best swordsmen out there, and its body will certainly give it an advantage in combat, and I presume that it can also fly. Now, to be fair, Edgemont is only covered on the upper part of its body. Its legs are pretty much uncovered, hence quite vulnerable. And with some techniques of some of the swordsmen who are higher up in the list, you'll quickly understand that Edgemont would do well to cover itself as much as possible. It does have an okay energy blast when it uses its blades, which enables it to attack someone at a distance, but it is a relatively simple projectile with nothing exceptional to it, and I'm not sure it would be able to eliminate multiple opponents with it. I think its best chance, I would say, is to get its enemies in range of its blades. All in all, I have no doubt that Edgemont can fight multiple opponents just because of its impressive physique, even if the number of opponents will be relatively limited in comparison to those higher up. Also, as it has been stated that its armor is made out of metal and not chrome digizoid metal, its durability, despite possibly being high, might also be limited depending on what comes its way. If Zambamon manages to land a clean hit, it would be pretty much game over for Edgemont. 8th spot goes to Dramon, and as a swordsman I find it better prepared for combat than Edgemont. Let me tell you why. So as we said, Edgemont's body is covered in metal, right? While Dramon's body is clad in chrome digizoid, one of the strongest metal in the Digimon universe, which means that not all attacks will get through, on the contrary to metal. I mean, sure, Zambammon's hammer would still break it, but chrome digizoid all in all is said to be a matter that is quite reliable in terms of defense without necessarily slowing down the wielder. Again, doesn't mean that it is invulnerable. On top of that, while Edgemont was created to fight wicked beings, Dramon was one who completed the trial of the 4 great dragons, which means that by the end of the trial, it became an expert swordsman trained in the art of combat. And now, it carries the extensible great sword called Fragarak, and has mastered its 3 forms. The first form is the Heavenly Dragon Ripper, where it accelerates Fragarak with a spin of its body and then drives it vertically through the opponent's skull, cutting them in half. Second form is the Rising Dragon Wave. It refined a dragon wave with Fragarak and then releases its pointing upward, slaying the opponent from the sword's pressure alone. Third and final form is the Biting Dragon Blade form, a form where it steps in close to the opponent and then curls Fragarak around them, shaving off their whole body with the entwined sword. To conclude, Dramon should be able to fight about the same number of opponents as Edgemont, but they both have their own advantage. Edgemont can fly and Dramon has chrome digizoid, and maybe it can also fly. So I think they both pretty much come at the same spots, and I don't really think one of them is necessarily stronger than the other. It's just that being covered in better armor could save one's life. But you know what? Despite the chrome digizoid armor, Dramon would end up falling if it fought, let us say, hundreds Musiamon, as it simply doesn't have the tools nor enough advantages to last that long. Heck, it doesn't even have projectiles with the sword. But the sword itself, with its different mode changes, can give it an advantage not even Edgemont would have. The DT Digimon Kazuchimon got the 7th spot and is definitely deserving of being on the list. It digivolved by tempering its body and soul to the limit through unimaginable training. You could see it somewhat as a god of fighting because fighting is a sacred rite that must never be tarnished because it has devoted everything to it. A natural-born warrior who is so immersed that it continues to refine its tactics and strategies regardless of its own comforts, and once in battle, it turns into a raging war god and exhibits the strength to take on 1,000 warriors. and to do that, it uses its dual lightning swords. See, Kazuchimon is definitely the type of swordsman that gained a reputation which precedes it. And despite having some very impressive skills, I couldn't place it higher because it lacks something extraordinary. There's one skill it has that made it go higher though. It has the ability to erect a barrier of lightning to force the enemy into a one-on-one battle. No one can get in and no one can get out. In a battle against multiple opponents, that could really come in handy because Kazuchimon could simply eliminate them one by one. However, the question is, what if Kazuchimon locked itself with a swordsman that is as powerful if not more powerful than itself? Like for example Kaiser Greymon, otherwise known as Emperor Greymon, who I gave the 6th spot. An incredible dragon warrior swordsman who possesses power over flame. It carries the sword Ryungonken, a sword in which the souls of dragons are sealed. See, I give Emperor Greymon the 6th spot because it can do too much with its sword. Not only is it extremely good in close range, but it can also fire arrows from its sword to hit enemies in long range. Arrows whose flames are so intense that they become a white light. So try to imagine how hot that would be. If you can't, then let me tell you this. See, the main color in flames change depending on the temperature. When the flame is red, it can go up to 977 degrees Fahrenheit or 1830 degrees. Orange flames burn at 2010 to 2190 degrees, and the hottest flame, which is white, burns at an incredible 2370 to 2730 degrees. So, Emperor Greymon can summon scorching hot flames, and on top of that, via the use of its sword, it can summon 8 pyro dragons who are quite unpredictable with their movements and are probably very hot too. Swordsmen of the likes of Kazuchimon will probably get in trouble if they were to lock themselves with Digimon of the likes of Emperor Greymon, who not only is covered in armor but also excels in close range combat while still having a trick or two up its sleeves. 5th spot, I gave it to the Holy and Royal Knight Jasmine. And believe me, I had a lot of trouble placing Jasmine here. It does feel like it should be lower, but let me explain why I put it here at the 5th spot. If you guys have a thing to say, by the way, just complain in the comment section. See, Jasmine has been trained by Gankumon, another royal knight and one who is extremely powerful. Inspired by its master, Jasmine now also walks around with these sort of fiery creatures called At, René and Paul that follow its every direction. These creatures can use omnidirectional counter techniques that meets every enemy attack with their 9 blades. And they can also form a shield out of which a beam can be fired. This is good as it could enable Jasmine to face multiple opponents, but you know what, it's not extraordinary when you compare it to those at a lower ranking. The reason why Jasmine got this spot though is because it has a very impressive technique called Aus Generics. It is a technique which leaves its physical abilities unbound by the laws of the digital world. What happens is that it rewrites its own data to perform crazy actions, such as breaking the speed of light to slash the opponent. But the boost is only temporarily, and we don't know exactly what the limitations of these techniques are, and on top of that, we don't know in what state Jasmine would be in after using the technique. It could be that it'll be pretty much dead tired. So it's basically because of the Aus Generics that Jasmine got this far in the list. But as it looks like a technique meant to end the battle quickly, it will have to make sure to do just that. But Jasmine's swords aren't really that special, they don't really have special abilities, which means that if someone is covered in, let us say, an armor of Chrome Digizoid like Slayerjamon, who we discussed previously, then Jasmine would be in for some trouble. 4th spot, I gave it to Zambamon, a courageous warrior who reigns as the general of the Musiamon Corps. Although it is a general, it voluntarily stands at the head of its own army and prefers fighting styles which cut into the enemy. Oh, and believe me, cutting is what it does. Its lower half is fused with its horse in order to move more easily about the battlefield, so that even during a pitched battle, it is able to swing its sword without losing its balance. And speaking of sword, see, Emperor Greymon has dragons sealed in its sword, right? Well, Zambamon carries 2 swords. In its right hand, it wields the gigantic Zanbato called Ryuzanmaru, which literally translates to Dragon Beheader. In its left hand, it wields a slender Yutu, as it is called. And both of these swords have crazy abilities. With its big sword, it unleashes an attack which has the power to cut through the opponent's armor regardless of whether they are defending themselves. Which means that you literally cannot block against Zambamon. You may have armor, you may cross blades with it, Zambamon's sword will get through. And considering how huge the sword is, the victim will probably get chopped off. A sword that cannot be blocked, I can't stress enough how broken that is. This also means that you can only avoid its attack and not block it. But here's the problem. Zambamon is not only huge but also fast, as it is still a warrior who fused with a horse, which means that you cannot outrun it. So with just this sword alone, Zambamon could literally face multiple opponents and make it look like sports. But on top of that, its other sword has also another technique. With the other sword, it can release a shockwave generated by the nimble swings of the blade. A shockwave that can cut the opponent apart crosswise. So in other words, it also has projectiles in the form of shockwaves which can destroy those who are unlucky to find themselves in the line of fire. So Zambamon, with just its physique, its swords and its battle experience as a commander, is definitely one of the best swordsmen out there. Third spot goes to Omega Armament Burst Mode. It is a digivolved version of Armament, after it fused with Barbamon, a demon lord, and System Omega. Now, for System Omega, we should maybe discuss it in another video. It's basically a program that is used by Barbamon that can potentially gather all the Digimon's Digicores from a particular zone. More on that in another video. Omega Armament Burst Mode is outright broken, and there is very little that a regular swordsman would do against it. You know what, giving up and going back would be my advice to all, because first of all, the Digimon is around 200 feet or 60 meters. If it is already that huge, let alone its swords. And at some given point, height does matter. That's something you'll have to accept. Speaking of the swords, there are swords around Omega Armament that float permanently. It's almost as if they were standing ready for those who might get a little too close. And pay attention, these swords are not just basic swords. Let me explain why. See, Omega Armament Burst Mode can attack with a sword of lightning to not only chop off, but to also electrocute. And that is basically using Kazuchimon's dual lightning swords. It can also attack with a sword of darkness, which is based on Barbamon. It can attack with its swords of ice and fire. The latter is basically using Emperor Greymon's element. And on top of that, Omega Armament can summon swords and make it rain on all its enemies. And again, these are not little swords, these swords are as huge as buildings. So Omega Armament in its burst mode not only has multiple swords, each of which having their own power of the elements, it can make it rain of swords which could pretty much cover an entire field, without forgetting that these swords are huge in size. And then Omega Armament is itself also good in close range combat, even if I doubt one would be able to get close enough. Its body is huge and it can heal itself and increase in strength. So my friends, I think it would require an army to face this Digimon, and even the army itself would maybe not be enough. Second spot goes to the deity Digimon Tatamoon, and boy, at some given point you have to stop. Tatamoon has got to be one of the most terrifying swordsmen out there. It is nicknamed the one-man squad and is treated as if it was a legion despite being a single being. Tatamoon is the type of Digimon that would require an army to take it down, if they would be able to do so. For starters, Tatamoon is over 240 feet tall or over 73 meters. And in some depictions, its sword appears to be taller than Tatamoon itself, so try to imagine. This means that with just one swing of the sword, potentially thousands of Digimon, like let us say Musiamon, would simply disappear. And on top of that, I forgot to explain the following about the sword. Tatamoon's sword is called Zanjito. It translates to beheading god sword. It is a bone sword carved from Skull Greymon's bones, and the hatred filling the sword makes a low groan. The Zanjito is so powerful and so huge that it cannot be blocked. I have zero doubt that it can cut through all variants of Chrome Digizoid, and not even Gallantmon with its Holy Shield Aegis would be able to do much against just one swing. When Tatamoon swings the Zanjito, it swings in a way that makes it slide through the opponent's armor and body, reaching their Digicore, their soul, unhindered and chopping it up. If the opponent takes this technique head on, they'll never be able to recover. On top of that, Tatamoon can also eviscerate the opponent with the Zanjito, causing them to fall into a hallucination that they are being harrowed even after the blade is pulled out, so that they don't stop suffering until their spirit dies. You want to know what's worse with Tatamoon? You see the skulls on its arms. These are all data of the power it has stolen from the enemies it has defeated so far, which means that it will only get stronger and stronger. And these skulls can also be used to summon an army of undead legion to overrun the enemy's forces. But don't worry, in this form of combat, it won't be able to call upon the army. So while I did put Tatamoon in front of Omega Armament, I was hesitating between the two because it feels like it will become a game of who hits the other first. Will Tatamoon get through the summoning of swords and will it resist the different elemental blades of Omega Armament, or will Omega Armament be able to heal after Tatamoon's Sanjito goes through its Digicore? It's very difficult to say, but to me, they are by far the deadliest swordsmen out there in the Digimon universe. I have one honorable mention out of the many swordsmen out there. Reason why I didn't put Omnimon X in the list is because it wouldn't be fair towards the others. I can accept a mode change, but the X variants usually are complete reconfigurations of a Digimon where their weaknesses are somewhat reduced and they are given other advantages. But if I were to put Omnimon X in the list, it would probably reach top 5, but not the first. Sure, it has the attack called All Delete, which erases everything that comes in contact with its edge, and sure, it acquired the Omega Inforce, which enables Omnimon to instantaneously read ahead and respond accordingly. Omnimon X isn't the best swordsman, that is when I take into account my criteria, because its advantages are quite limited. Sure, its sword can delete everything, but what if Omnimon was surrounded by many Digimon and it only has to rely on its sword? How many would it be able to kill? And sure, you can say that the Omega Inforce would give it an edge, but this technique is not perfect. The Omega Inforce couldn't properly predict the Armament X's fighting style because it was too erratic. And if Omnimon X is surrounded by many, and it only has its sword and the Omega Inforce, even if I have no doubt many Digimon could perish, Omnimon X wouldn't be able to predict all of their movements, as its style isn't meant to fight many, to be honest, and it would end up being killed. First spot, and I'm sure many will get surprised, goes to Tortimon. And to be honest, if it weren't for the unfair advantages of the Digimon who are lower on my list, I have zero doubt that Tortimon is the best swordsman in the Digimon franchise. And I have many reasons to claim this. But before I explain it, guys, think through. I'm not saying which swordsman is the strongest. I'm looking for the best swordsman as in the best prepared swordsman, or the swordsman that has all the tools to survive a huge attack. You get the drill. See, just like Paimon, who I mentioned earlier, who is a clown but categorized as a wizard, Tortimon is a samurai that is also categorized as a wizard. And wizards in general are very intelligent. Tortimon is no different except that its area of expertise lies in finding battle strategies. Let me explain. You see, even more than its merits as a soldier, Tortimon actually excels more in strategy with plans which are even said to be ingenuity itself, as if gushing forth like a spring. This means that Tortimon is more a tactician with a true merit that is not its physical strength but its ingenuity. So give it enough time and it will gain absolute advantage just by mere analytical skills. I think it goes without much explanation that you should always fear the person who is intelligent. But now try to imagine. Tortimon is a tactician, and on top of that it is in the possession of a peerless sword that has two names. One is the Sword of Storms, the other is Snake Sealed by God in Iron. This sword is one which conceals such tremendous power that not just anyone can handle it. Within the sword is sealed a sinister power strong enough to split a star in two. So drawing this sword could mark the collapse of an entire star. That is why Tortimon battles without drawing the sword, but even so, it exhibits the destructive force of its menace. When it stabs the ground once with its sword, an earthquake will be generated. When it stabs the ground twice, 100 dead warriors will be summoned to help it in combat. When it stabs the ground thrice, the surrounding land will collapse with a shockwave, or the surrounding land will simply explode. When it slashes 5 times with the sword, deadly shockwaves will be generated. When it slashes with the sword 6 times, a massive vortex will be generated. When it thrusts the sword into the ground, it can create a small mountain range. So Tortimon has so many advantages from its sword to its high intellect. It may not be as big as Tatamoon, but it sure has the tools to fight titans. And it can make an entire land collapse. And and if we take the power of its sword literally, it can destroy an entire star. So Tortimon to me is by far the best swordsman out there because it is the best prepared for long battles, and even battles against beings that are 40 times its height. Hi guys, this is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I love making these top 10 videos. Last one I made was about the Digimon height, if I remember correctly, and that was very well received. And here we're talking about the top 10 Digimon swordsmen. I'd love to make other top 10 videos, like for example the top 10 strongest dragons, or the top 10 strongest Digimon ninja, or top 10 smartest Digimon. There are lots of possibilities for videos concerning the franchise isn't that well explored, which I'm trying to do for all of you. I will make a separate playlist to put the top 10 videos to make it easier for all of you to catch up on newer and older videos. And before I close the video, I do want to say the following. Guys, I know this top 10 list might not be to your liking, so try to make it exciting for me and for the others who might be reading your comments. Make sure to make your own top 10 list and be as elaborate as possible. Because, you know, in terms of Digimon and swordsman, trust me, it's extremely difficult to make a top 10 list and truly categorize them from best to less best. It's crazy. But anyway, make sure to subscribe to the channel and to drop a like. That will help us survive the YouTube swordsman, which is the YouTube algorithm.